I'd like to show you some different strategies for doing formative assessments in your classroom. Some of these are going to be high-tech formative assessments and some are going to be low-tech formative assessments. But really briefly, here's what a formative assessment is. Those are little assessments that you do frequently over the course of a lesson to survey student understanding. Now, you might think of those as being very, very formal, but they're not always very, very formal. And what you do with that information is then you use it to guide the next steps in your instruction. Sometimes you do that on the spot by doing a little bit of reteaching. Sometimes you store it away to teach the next day. So formative assessments really help you deliver instruction efficiently. It's kind of like anybody who's ever practiced a musical instrument. You don't keep playing the entire piece. You practice the part that you need to practice. Otherwise, you're just rehearsing inefficiently and you don't actually get any better. So we talk about how we have no time to get through the standards. Well, this helps us get through the standards in a way, in a timely fashion. So you're only going to teach what needs to be taught to whom it needs to be taught. And you can be assessing a whole variety of things. You might be assessing metacognitive skills. I'm sorry. You might be discussing student performance against the standards, and you might be discussing assessing process skills, like how well they're collaborating and what planning skills they're using. And really quickly to show you what metacognitive skills look like, and you can go back and click the link in this presentation later. Hattie says that teaching students metacognitive skills are actually one of the best ways to get them to learn. And so if you're assessing metacognitive skills, you're doing some of these things. They need to be able to articulate what they learn, identify what they learn, set goals and monitor their own progress, and evaluate and revise their own work. And they also have to identify the learning strategies that they're using and how the learning strategies are most effective for them. So do go back and dig into this article a little bit more, but that might be something else that you're assessing. So starting off, low-tech formative assessments. Some examples of these are if you just do a thumbs up, thumbs to the side, thumbs down. You might do this if you're just trying to ask the kids if they understand the basics of the concept that you're teaching. That's a really simple one. And based on it, you can say, all right, if you thumbs to the side means you sort of understand it. So I'm going to pull this group of kids who sort of understands it into a small group in math, and the students who totally understood it can go on with the homework. And the students who don't understand it at all maybe can partner up with the students who completely understand it. And then you can maybe take the group in the middle. Or it could mean that you pull out another tool to reteach that concept. Remember, teaching the same thing in the same way over and over again doesn't really necessarily solve your problem, because if you taught it that way once, what's to say just doing it again is going to actually accomplish what you're after? Another really awesome low-tech formative assessment are homemade whiteboards. Some of you might actually have little whiteboards in your classroom, but what you can do is you can take paper or cardstock and put it inside a sheet protector and write on it with Expo marker. It works really, really well. You can just use a tissue, or some people keep, old socks around to wipe them off. But I've used this one for practicing there, and there, different grammar things, where the kids just write the 3 choices up and you give them a sentence and they circle the correct answer, and on the count of 3, they hold them up. And I use them in math quite a bit as well. Homemade whiteboards are pretty awesome and completely low tech. Having an entry or exit slip is a fantastic way too. That's just prepared. It can be the do now when the kids come in the room. They can answer your 3 grammar questions, or maybe fill in the blank in a science paragraph. And you could do something similar for the exit slip. If it's an entry slip, you're going to use it to direct your instruction that day. Maybe, you can flip through them quickly and see that they really need this particular vocabulary term reviewed. It's very obvious. So you're going to take just a few minutes to do that. Exit slip, you can take time overnight and you can use that information to plan groupings, and you name it. But it should help you create an action plan for the next day. A word splash is really fun too. You put the essential vocabulary words up on the board, and I've had students do this in groups where they take those and then they turn them into a paragraph that makes sense. It's a nice way to say, you can tell the kids that are fudging their word splash, where they're just kind of making up sentences that don't necessarily make sense, and versus the ones who are actually making little paragraphs that demonstrate their understanding. It's just a great review activity as well, but you can certainly see understanding. Four Corners is an awesome active learning game where you label your corners A, B, C, and D, and then give them multiple choice questions. I make the multiple choice questions visible on the whiteboard too, so that students can actually see them, because they're not always auditory, and I always need to go back and see what was read to me. And then they physically move themselves to the answer choice, and you can see right away who is just following their friends, and whether the bulk of the class understands a concept or not. Sometimes they're split 50-50, and that's a great discussion. Why is this not the correct answer? Number 6, 3, 2, 1 countdown. This might be on that exit slip that you have. 3 things you've learned, 3 things that surprised you, and 1 thing you'll do with your knowledge. You'll find out if a student is coming up empty, and you'll find out which students are understanding on a deeper level. That 3rd question about what you'll do with your knowledge is a real application sort of question. 7 on my list here is stand up if you get it. I have just done a really informal thing, especially teaching math, where if you understand the concept, if I think I've got at least half of them that understand the concept, and this worked with middle levels, these were 5th graders, I'd ask them to stand up, and then I'd ask them to buddy up with students who did not raise their hand. And it was just a quick way to do some guided practice then, and just to do some additional rehearsal. So these are things that you're using more frequently in your class, and kind of making some on-the-spot decisions. So for more intensive formative assessments, you're not necessarily making on-the-spot decisions. If you're doing running records for reading, you find out their guided reading level and you can assess growth. Quizzes, you're probably going to take home and make curricular decisions for the next day. Pre-tests, you might even decide that a certain group of kids doesn't need to do the material that you have. And then you'll have to decide what form of enrichment that you're going to give for them. Attitude assessments, this is, you can check for student interest, student engagement. I think about reading when I think about attitude assessments. Collaborative skills too. How well are they working in groups? The BIA has some wonderful collaborative rubrics that you can just give a part of and have the students assess on their way out the door. Especially since this is kind of one of those important 21st century skills that you want kids to be able to demonstrate. Mindfulness assessments too. Do you want them to demonstrate mindful practices before they do a test to see if they're panicking when they get the test in front of them? But either way, it's probably not going to direct your instruction in that instant. It's probably something that you're going to go home and analyze and see how it's going to direct the next day's or the next week's instructions. So high-tech formative assessments. Kahoot is another fun one. Again, you notice we're trying to keep all your students actively engaged. Kahoot, you can make an account with Google or not. If all of your students are participating in activities, then you can actually see them. Their thinking is observable, and that's an extremely important thing. If they're just sitting quietly, it's hard to know what they're thinking. So Kahoot, there's a bunch of activities that are already created in here. Kids love Kahoot. Even my high school personal children enjoy Kahoot. But if you hit preview, you can see what Kahoot looks like for students. That was just a sample Kahoot that somebody had made. So a student on their Chromebook is going to go to a screen and they're going to try to get a game pin. So continuing with Kahoot, this is one that somebody's already made. You can decide player versus player, team versus team. This is reading comprehension. I'm just going to choose this. And so what the kids are going to do is they'll have, this is supposed to be the student device over here, and students will, yikes, turn down the volume. Students will add that number, and once they've done that, they'll put in a name, and this is where you'll have to talk to them about making sure that the name is appropriate. And then once everybody is in, you, the teacher, this is the teacher side, is going to hit start. And the students are going to start answering the questions as quickly as they can. They really like it. They like being competitive. The team piece is nice if you want to avoid, I'm just going to plug some stuff in and it may, yep, see, totally wrong. So I'm just doing two things at once here. If you want to eliminate the competitive piece, have a team piece where you choose the partners. But anyway, exciting music, competitive, the kids have fun with it. And then at the end, I believe you're going to get a report of, well, you can just see as they do it, how the students are doing or not. And you can see which students got the most questions right or not. You can, if I were you, I would ask them to do an anonymous name actually, because then, then when it just lists them in order, you don't necessarily, if somebody's going to be embarrassed by that, you might want them to be anonymous, although it is awfully hard to be anonymous in that game because they are getting, sometimes they'll get a little bit loud, but that's a good sign because it means they're having fun. Another high-tech formative assessment is just a Google form. Google form, you can give a quiz, and this is the quiz that went out to families. And this quiz will go out, and many of you are familiar with forms at this point. But what's special about it is you can click responses, and then this all happens in real time. Responses, and you can look and see exactly, just have a group of the responses without seeing individuals, and you can see how many people responded in different ways. And so then with the class, you can say, all right, we just did this really quick quiz. What does this tell us about what we need to work on for tomorrow? And they can tell you exactly what concept it seems that they're all having trouble with. And that might give you an opportunity to do a quick review or a quick 5 problems, or find a video in BrainPop, different things that can help you review and, teach the kids that concept they don't know. Google Classroom is an awesome place to see, to get visible thinking. Now this is just an image, but in Google Classroom, you can post a Google Doc where you want them to put comments and have a discussion space while you're teaching, or you can post a note-taking sheet. You can also post a question and have them respond to the question. I recommend having them really make sure that they use their academic language, beginning capitals and end marks, really have high expectations on that kind of stuff all the time. But again, you can see what level they're understanding the information that you are putting in front of them. Padlet's another good one too. You can use Padlet for all sorts of things. Padlet can be a collaborative space. This is another free website. I use Padlet as my note-taking space this particular time while I was reading a book. So with kids, it can be one of those things where as they're watching a video, they can make these text boxes. They can put images in about their topic. They can put websites in about their topic. They can put YouTube videos in about their topic. It really, and some of these backgrounds even look like corkboards. So it's kind of like an electronic collection of information, and you can use it in a whole lot of ways. They can also move these things around when it's in an editing mode. So that's kind of a neat way to sort. You can actually share it with them. They can also post to the Padlet, something that they've learned. And that can be another way for you to assess, what they picked up from your lesson that day. Any sort of graphic organizer in Google Docs is a great way to see what your students are thinking. This close reading hyperdoc actually has the article at the top of it. And then it has the kids can actually respond. So copy and paste evidence from the article, and then kids are going to be typing up what they're thinking. So you can find out whether or not they understand this concept or not. Also, students can blog. That's always a good one. That can just be a handwritten journal. That can be a Google Doc that you posted in Google Classroom. All sorts of ways for students to respond in a blog. And by no means are these, the end all be all for formative assessments. Observation and just getting the kids to talk and use different discussion strategies while you move around and listen to those discussions is an excellent way to assess whether or not they're learning. Again, you need to get them participating so that you can see their learning is obvious. Get them doing something. So this last page is just a variety of other resources. The last one is a book that we do have in the district. So let me know if you are interested in seeing it. And thanks for checking out this video on formative assessments.